All right, everybody, wherever you are, I hope you are doing well as we kick off 2022. And I got to tell you, man, I ended 2021 on a high note, or at least we did as an organization. I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but none of what we do or the plans that we have for 2022 for Consequence of Habit as a foundation that is dedicated to bringing awareness to the impact that habits have on our mental health, success, and the environment. Well, none of that happens without support, without investments from companies, organizations, individuals, funds. And as somebody new, I mean, Jesus, how do you even start that? That's a question. How do you get people to understand what you're trying to do and invest in it? In the last week of 2021, I received 2 notifications. First one coming from my favorite company, I'd say, Athletic Brewing Company. They reached out and made an investment in us it's massive. It has massive implications of what we can and can't do. And a couple of days later, I got another notification. This was a phone call on Christmas Eve, and this was from the Patriot Fund. I explained this in the last episode, but this is another nonprofit that raises money for veteran organizations that are, they're doing positive things for the veteran community. And when you're first starting out and you're building something, and people believe in you enough, they believe in your team, that they're willing to put something behind it, man. It's an amazing feeling and an amazing responsibility all at the same time. So with that said, if you're part of an organization, if you're just somebody who wants to see this thing grow, be part of this journey with us, then I ask you to head over to consequenceofhabit.org. Read what we're doing. If you feel so inclined, either reach out if you want more information. I'd love to sit down with people and to kind of explain the direction we're heading and some of the ways that we are going to be making positive changes within the community. Or you can donate right there. Up to you. Or just take some time, go through the site. All right, that brings us to this week's guest. I'm going to give this one a theme. And the theme this week is controlling your destiny. It's understanding that limitations that are put on you, specifically when they come from others, well, how much power does that hold? What does that mean to you? What do your own limitations mean? And that's across the board. That's physically, mentally, all of it. This week, I'm joined by U.S. Army Special Forces Green Beret, Nick Lavery. Now, Nick is a self-proclaimed knuckle dragger, meathead, who likes to blow stuff up and shoot guns. So as you can imagine, he's a nice fit for where he is right now. But in 2013, something changed. Life happened. Nick was serving in Afghanistan when one of the Afghani police officers turned on the soldiers. And unfortunately, in this gun battle, Nick lost most of his right leg. Now think about that for a moment. You're a U.S. Army Special Forces Green Beret, self-proclaimed gym rat. Prided yourself, your identity wrapped up in the fact of what you're able to do physically. And much like Sarah May, go back to episode 60 to hear her story. Nick decided not to let anyone else dictate what his future looks like. Well, what I hope you get from Nick's story is the fact that no one dictates on what our future looks like or doesn't look like. These limitations that are put on by other people, they're meaningless. It's limitations that you put on yourself that's important. It's where you can see yourself going. It's the habits you put in place to get you there. And shortly after Nick lost his leg, he started a process. We're gonna get into detail about that, but he started a journey of doing whatever it took to get himself back to being an active member of the Special Forces community. Now, this isn't just this thing where you show back up with a on your prosthetic and say, I'm ready to return back to duty. It's not the way these things work. Now, there's an understanding that the responsibility that comes along with being on a team like this, well, it's bigger than you. It's not just you. You potentially have the life of your teammates in your hands. So the requirements to get back on, well, they're no different. They're no different because you have a prosthetic leg. So if I hope you guys get anything from this story, you dictate what your limitations are. Please welcome to the podcast, Nick Lavery. All right, everybody, I'm excited about this one. Welcome back to the podcast. This is your host, JT, and this is A Consequence of Habit. Today, today we are honored to have on Nick Lavery. Nick is a active Green Beret, and I say active, and there's a reason I'm going to emphasize that word, and you're gonna hear why here in a minute. But I want to start off by saying, Nick, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, man. I appreciate you having me, JT. It's good to connect. Looking forward to it.
All right. So in our little back and forth on emails, you kind of even threw out the question like, hey, what is it we're even looking to do here? Like, what is the purpose of this conversation? And I love that, right? I like being challenged a little bit, not just to have people on because they've got a great Instagram story or they've got, the people are drawn to them for certain reasons. I want to get kind of into the weeds about certain things. And sure, you're a Green Beret. You played college football. There's all of these things that you've done along the way. And that led up to an accident in 2013, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Can you break that down? Let us know kind of a synopsis of what happened. And then we're going to really kind of get into the rebuilding, how habits have allowed you to get back to places where people thought you would never be again.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And I'm going to kind of go wave tops here, JT. Give you and your audience enough background to kind of give what we're going to really get into some context. So not going to go into the nitty gritty, details, but the short version is, my second combat rotation into Afghanistan, which began in the fall of 2012, I was wounded in combat on 3 separate occasions. The first one was some shrapnel I took to the back of my shoulder. Really wasn't a big deal. It took me out of the fight about a week, and then I was back doing what we do. About a month or so after that, a couple months after that, I took an AK-47 round to the side of my face, which sounds a lot worse than it really was. I got real lucky. It just kind of grazed my cheek, sliced open an artery. There was a lot of blood, but it looked worse than it really was. Sure. And it wasn't nearly as bad as it sounds when you hear someone say I was shot in the face, right? On the very tail end of that same deployment, so now we're in March of 2013, with only a couple, 2-3 weeks left in our rotation, was when I was injured for the third time. And this was much more traumatic, right? Much more severe. And it was the result of an insider attack, which is commonly referred to as a green on blue scenario, which basically means that one of the guys that we had been working alongside of, one of the members of our partnered force, essentially turned on us. And it was just prior to a mission. We had just finished our pre-mission brief. And it was a perfect scenario for this to happen. And this individual jumped on the back of a truck-mounted, or jumped on the back of a Ford Ranger that had a truck-mounted PKM machine gun on it and opened fire into the group from about 15 feet away.
Wow.
That was the initiation of a complex ambush because simultaneously we began receiving fires and rockets from outside of our compound, right? So this was obviously pre-planned and staged, and the result of that was 12 U.S. casualties, including 3 that were killed, and another 9 or 10 or so Afghan partner force members that were also killed or wounded. So it was considered the most catastrophic insider attack in the history of the GWAT, post 9/11. The result, most of the damage to me was done to my legs. I ended up taking estimated 4 to 5 rounds to my right leg, which just turned it into just a meat sandwich. Severed my femoral artery, shattered my femur, and I ended up taking another round to my lower left leg. But the most of the damage was to my right leg. Pretty severe, right? You slice your femoral artery, things get urgent pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And, I was able to perform some medical interventions on myself. My teammates were able to perform some interventions on me. And obviously I was able to survive that, which kind of defied a lot of odds and almost broke a lot of kind of medical certainties that we've become to accept as truths and realities, because I was on the ground for almost 90 minutes before I could even get on a helicopter. From that point, I went through a series of surgeries. I was in Afghanistan about 5 days before I was stable enough to put onto a plane. From there, they flew me to Germany, had another surgery there, took my leg off up to the knee at that point, and then I was at Walter Reed in Bethesda, which at this point, they're really fighting infection was the greatest risk to me. And there was a desire to remove my leg at the hip the second I got to Walter Reed, because my leg was just riddled with infection. But the chief ortho surgeon, who I'm still really great friends with today, decided that he thought he could save more of my leg, but he knew it was going to be a street fight, essentially. So it was 3, maybe 4 times a week. They were just incrementally amputating higher and higher and higher, cutting out the infection, pumping me full of antibiotics, trying to get it under control. And say 30, 35 surgeries later, it left me with what I have today. So spent about a year at Walter Reed learning how to live life as an amputee, kind of basic prosthetics stuff, basic functional stuff. And then from that point is when I returned back to my unit and really kind of began my more advanced rehab and really began my journey of getting back to operational status, back to my team, which was the goal from essentially the very beginning. And that's when things got, real interesting, right?
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So this isn't just a thing where you say, hey, I want to get back to my team, and you show up and you're like, hey guys, I'm ready to get back. Put me back on the team, right? Not everyone here who's listening to this is going to be, comes from the military, is a veteran. There's a process, right? Like there's a reason very few people make it to this. And then, there's requirements if you're gone for a bit to come back or to stay on it. What did that look like for you? Or if really for anybody, like what does that process look like? Because, you just mentioned from the very beginning, I knew my goal was to get right back to where I was.
It's an awesome question, JT. And I want to make sure I hit kind of these wickets along the way. So at the time I was with 3rd Special Forces Group out of Fort Bragg. That was the first unit I belonged to. I'm currently in 5th Special Forces Group out of Fort Campbell. So I'm in 3rd Group. 3rd Group, and those that don't understand how the United States Army Special Forces are broken down, the different groups are aligned regionally. So each group is responsible for a certain area of the earth, and that's their operational environment, right? That's their area of operation. 3rd Group at the time owned Afghanistan. That's all that we did when we were in 3rd Group. There were other units, other groups that were filtering in, but that's all that 3rd Group did. As a result of that, there were a lot of guys that were getting injured. Like that's where most of the fighting was happening. So 3rd Group was riddled with amputees, those that were killed. And as a result of that, and this is while I'm actually at Walter Reed, 3rd Group takes it upon themselves to develop a return to duty physical assessment. Now the military and special forces, we've got all these different physical fitness tests that are for record. 3rd Group decided to create an additional one that was more in line with combat-related tasks, as opposed to how fast can you run 2 miles.
Right.
They actually broke down what it's like to be in combat and replicated some of these events in a training environment.
Sure.
Right. So it turns into this 12 event PT test, all of which is done with a 50-pound weighted vest to simulate the gear that we carry. And it's brutal. Right. So they're literally creating this while I'm at Walter Reed. Strength and conditioning coaches from our program, the sports psychs from the unit, they're all putting this together. And I'm in contact with my unit members, my teammates, my leadership, the strength coaches, physical therapists, the entire time I'm at Walter Reed. They're checking in on me. They're coming to visit me. And they're telling me about this test that they're developing. And I'm going, man, that's fantastic. And I love the initiative and I love the direction you're going. Because third group's got a lot of guys that are banged up, but most of which want to keep doing their job. So this is great, right? It's a as objective way to analyze whether or not someone's able to go back and do the physical rigors of combat. Awesome. So they're kind of bouncing things off of me, ideas and whatnot. And they'll tell you, or they've told me since, that they weren't developing it for me. Like a really high above the knee amputee was not the type of patient that they thought could really take a shot at this thing. But they wanted me involved in the process because I was literally going through rehab. So I get back to Fort Bragg again, get back to my unit after about a year at Walter Reed, and I make my intentions known from the beginning. I tell all echelons of command, my goal is to go back to the team. And they said, okay, well, is that something that you can do right now? And I said, no, of course not. Like I was real early on in my recovery, but that's where I'm going. And they said, okay, cool. Well, what do you want to do in the meantime? And I said, I need a job. Obviously, I need to provide value. I requested to go on as an instructor in our combatives committee. Combatives is a military term for hand-to-hand combat.
Yeah.
They granted that request. So day to day, I'm working as an instructor, teaching combatives and close quarters battle. And now I'm working with our strength coaches, physical therapists, dietitians, and my rehab and recovery is reaching a new level of production. I do that about 8 months. And at that point, I decide I was ready to give it a shot at getting back. And I make that known to my leadership. I said, okay, hey, I feel pretty good. I think I can do this. Like, what's the process? To your point, to your question, right? So what's the process to do that? And the short answer is there really wasn't this nice and clean, laid out pipeline for me to follow. All right, they had guys with much less severe injuries return back to operational status. With me, they looked at it as a different case. It was unprecedented for an above-the-knee amputee to go back to an SF ODA, an SF team, and then go back into Afghanistan to conduct combat operations. It hadn't happened. So they were real cautious about their decision-making and how do we mitigate this risk and ensure that we're putting someone on that team that really is supposed to be there, that should be there, that is not a liability. And it kind of just began with them kind of throwing the standard physical assessments at me that we do, right? Your basic Army PT test, a 12-mile ruck march, kind of these physical events that we're all used to as soldiers. And it kind of just kept going. There was no set timeline. I would be made aware of what my next evaluation was going to be, maybe a week or 2 or 3 in advance. Hey, you're going to do this thing on this date. So for the next 12 or so weeks, I was doing 1 or 2 assessments a week. And it began initially almost entirely focused on the physical realm. But they eventually branched that out and they started looking at me cognitively, proficiency in terms of my actual job, psychologically. So I ended up going through all these different screenings and evaluations, and they wanted to be very thorough, as they should have been, because they knew my team that I was trying to go back to was set to go back into Afghanistan in just a few months from that point.
Wow.
So my last evaluation was the return to duty test that I was telling you about that third group created. That was my last one. And the short story is the day before I took my test, the group command sergeant major took it alongside a buddy of mine who was shot through the hand and he was trying to get back onto his team. he took it as his battle buddy just to try the test out.
Yeah.
Our group command sergeant major is a PT animal. He's a stud.
Sure.
Right? Perfectly able-bodied dude. I walk in the gym. This is the day before I'm taking my test. They just finished taking it, and they're both laid out on the turf, drenched in sweat, exhausted. And I said, "Hey, Sergeant Major, how you doing?" He's like, "Good, man." He's like, "I just took the return of duty test, and they just kicked my ass." And I said, "Yeah, it's tough." He said, "You're doing this tomorrow, right?" I said, "Yeah." He's like, "All right, cool. I'm going to be here." I said, "Perfect." Next day comes. There's like 50 people at this thing. Every echelon of command, they're all there. My teammates are there. A bunch of the other guys are there. And they're just following me, this giant entourage from one event to the next.
No pressure.
I finished the last event, and I'm standing there, and I'm trying to avoid passing out, right? Like my peripheral vision is going away. I am completely out of gas.
Right.
Trying to look tough, right? Trying to look like I could do it again if I needed to. And Group Command Sergeant Major comes over and he says, "And then I just took this test myself yesterday. If I was not here to witness you do that in person, I never would believe that you just did that." And I said, "Okay, well, thank you." This is at the end of 12 weeks, right? And God knows how many different tests. I said, "I appreciate it, Sergeant Major, but like, what else are you guys going to ask me to do? Are you going to put me back on my team or not?" And he looks over at the group commander and he says, "Hey, boss, what do you think?" And the colonel said, "Hey, Sergeant Major, this is a manning decision. This is your decision. But I don't know how you're going to tell this dude no after what we just put him through." And Group CSM just looked at me and said, "Hey, man, your orders will be ready tomorrow, and you're going back."
Dude, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. Now, you said from the very beginning, I'm going to back up because I listened to you talk, and I think, you correct me if I'm wrong, you're standing in front of a bunch of people, and I don't know if they work in the world of prosthetics, and you were talking about being a tough customer, right? Like you have a lot of demands on. Is this ringing a bell?
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
And you mentioned one of the reasons you are where you are, and one of them was you don't let anyone else dictate what your life is going to look like from this point on. And one of the things I enjoy kind of diving into on this is we have an idea of what we are and what we're capable of because of the current situation that we're in. Now, I'm going to speculate and say that as they're running you through these tests and you're asking to go back, there is a large portion of those people that are questioning that this isn't going to, not even questioning, probably betting their next paycheck if they, if it came down to it. Nick's not coming back. He's missing his fucking leg. Like there's no way that this is happening. What is it? Where do you think that came from? Was it something you built along the way? Is it just being stubborn? Like, what is it where you're like, hey, no. Me losing my leg doesn't dictate what my life looks like from here on out.
Yeah. You bring up several awesome points, JT. First I want to hit is you're absolutely right. And although I had just a team, not only my actual team, my detachment teammates, but a team beyond that was in my corner, literally and figuratively, through the entire process, right? And without those people, I'm not where I am today, period, right? I am not, quote, self-made. I have all kinds of support that enabled me. Most of which, including family and close friends, have told me in retrospect, after the fact, say, "Hey, man, we were behind you, pushing you, alongside you, but I never thought that this would really happen," right? And they're not going to tell me that to my face in real time, but I was observant enough with most of them, and I understood. Right? It was unprecedented, so it's an understandable kind of assumption that, hey, man, we want to support this dude because he's going through a real tough time, but like this isn't going to happen. Like, eventually something's going to happen. The light bulb's going to go off in his head. He's going to realize this isn't going to work, or he's going to fail at something, not meet the standard, whatever it is. And this includes my teammates, again, family, and actual leadership that eventually had to make that decision, right? I've talked to some of these guys. That Command Sergeant Major that I was telling you about, I've talked to him after the fact, and he said, "Dude, I didn't think there was a chance in hell that I'd actually have to hit that crossroads, right? I didn't think it was going to happen, but you just kept fucking going. And eventually you got to a point where we had to make the call.
Yeah.
So it's true, right? And I was able to pick up on that, and I was understanding of that, but I also didn't care. And I really didn't care. I was appreciative of all the support and assistance I got.
Right.
But whether or not in the back of these people's minds they're like, yeah, I don't really know, it really didn't matter to me. Not because I don't respect their opinions, because I had these blinders on, JT. Like, I literally couldn't see or hear anything other than, this is the direction I'm going. This is what I'm going to do. That was it. So I think, to answer your question more acutely, for me, it was an iterative process. You know, in the early stages in the hospital, going through surgery, still on a bunch of drugs, right? Like, real early on, can't do anything for myself, was when I decided I'm going back to my team. I have no idea how or when, but I know that's where I'm going. And I was mostly fueled based on stubbornness, competitiveness, ego was mixed in there. Sure. But this whole, no one's going to determine my fate but me. I'm in the driver's seat. I'm in control. I'm going to do this because I want to. It was about me, right? Proving the naysayers wrong, proving myself right, kind of all that stuff. And that's what fueled me during the early phases. I'm grateful for that because it got me through a lot of really hard times. As I get back to my unit again, and I'm going through this evaluation process, week after week, assessment after assessment. And I'll never forget, middle of the night, I had taken maybe 4 or 5 different tests, and I'm knocking these things out, and I got a lot of momentum, and I'm doing well, and confidence is high. Like, I got this. I wake up in the middle of the night, 3 a.m., panicked, and it hit me that I was trying to go back to a team. I was trying to go back to a group of guys that put their lives in my hands, guys that have wives and kids, and it wasn't about me. Yes. As much as it was, as much as obsessed as I was, it wasn't about me. It was bigger than that. And I needed to be accepting of that. So I panicked, and because I didn't even really think about it until that point, and had some real candid, difficult conversations with some teammates, with some leadership, and they all basically said the same thing, which was, hey man, we don't know if this is going to work. We just don't know, but we know we want you to try. And if you get there and you get back, we'll be the first to tell you that, hey man, this isn't going to work. Like, you're a liability. This isn't going to work. And I'm fortunate to be in a profession where no bullshit candid feedback is just the way we operate. So I put all my trust in them. And I'll tell you, once I kind of shifted my focus to it being self-driven, to being about my teammates and the well-being of their families, it took my productivity and my output and my work ethic to a whole nother dimension.
Dude, I love it, man. I mean, I one of the things we try and talk about on here, when it comes to habits and their consequences, we have people that have amazing habits and they become entrepreneurs and professional athletes, and we have people, not so much, and they've struggled. But one of the things that gets people out of their own mind is to think of something or be part of something bigger than them, right? This thing of building connection by a shared purpose and being involved of something that it's greater than you. I can't even imagine what that felt like. Because, I mean, anyone can get it. Like, no one's going to tell me I lost my leg. Dude, I'm a special operator. No one's going to tell me what I'm going to do. But that realization, no, it's not about me. Sure, I can do these things, even if I can do them physically. Literally, people's lives could be in my hand, and that had to be a massive weight on you. But that is cool. You're in a position, man. This, you're not an accountant. No one's telling you can come back, and whether you're good at it or not, they're going to tell you right to your face, one way or the other, because they understand what the consequences are.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hey. What built this along the way? I mean, I just want to go back a little bit. You talk about, I love the fact that you acknowledge that I'm not a self-made person. I think that anyone who thinks that is naive. But I agree. But you have an operating system that not everybody has. how did that happen? What helped build that? Was it nature, nurture? Break that down for us.
Yeah, man. The short answer is it was fluid in the beginning and has been refined and defined through analysis retrospectively. And I'll dissect that a little bit. I'd say the foundation began mostly when I entered the military and got into special forces, right? I played sports in college, which is obviously structure and a team dynamic and the work ethic that's wrapped into that. But I wasn't this, highly disciplined, structured, dude prior to the military. Really, I wasn't. So the military kind of began to lay that framework and that foundation of these different kind of character traits and principles to kind of live off of. That said, it wasn't until I was injured and began this journey back that I realized I had to pay way more attention to a lot of these different principles and tenets, and then also add to them. In the earlier phases in the hospital, I just kind of started doing stuff. I didn't really have this strategy. I didn't have a formula. I began, doing a lot of research, finding people that were in similar circumstances as me, whether that was a military person that had lost a limb and is back in service, or just other amputees. One of the ones I grasped onto was Anthony Robles, who was born without a leg and became a NCAA wrestling champion at Arizona State. I read his book called Unstoppable, and I grabbed a lot from that. So I just kind of started reading and learning, but I was really just doing things. I was just doing stuff without this kind of grand plan. But I was real diligent about my logging of what I was doing, right? So I was tracking what I was doing, what my results were, and just going back and analyzing it week after week after week. Because again, I was obsessed with this. That's the only way to really put it.
Yeah.
Because I eliminated everything else in my life. Like everything else that was a distraction was removed. So this is all I was doing, all I was thinking about all the time, 24 hours a day, nonstop. So I'm tracking, I'm logging, and I'm just doing things. I'm doing this, I'm trying that. I'm taking in information, and I'm retrospectively analyzing what I had been doing, and I'm just begin kind of refining it, right? So I like to hammer on that a little bit because yet today, based on that, because of that, I do have a system that I employ, and it's still, is fluid. I still learn from it. I still refine it, but I didn't have this glide path that I nor anyone had really created for me when this journey began. It mostly started by trying new things and really getting past fear. That was probably the first kind of step to that process. When you live the first 30 years of your life as a very physically dominant, two-legged dude, and all of a sudden the 25% of your body is gone, and it really hacks away at your confidence, and the fear starts to set in on even things that you would do without even thinking. Getting past that and modifying my relationship with both fear and failure, I put it towards the very beginning of what allowed me to create, a system, an operating system, a formula, if you will, to kind of refine and have something to kind of go off of as I progress.
Yeah. Yeah. And I that was one of the things, even when I was reading your kind of your journey, like, and we mentioned it in the email, like identity. Like you grow up, you're an athlete, you're a big dude, right? You're obviously, you've worked very hard at it, but you've excelled in these physical things. And when something that is so you've depended on it, that's been part of who you are, is potentially gone, that's got to really kind of shake you at your core for a bit.
It did. It scared the hell out of me. Again, I was not an academic growing up. Right. The only reason why I went to college was to play football. If it wasn't for football, I would have enlisted in the military right out of high school. So I was, your kind of typical knuckle dragging jock kind of grunt dude most of my life growing up. When I, got into SF, got to my team, began operating, I was still very much a physical presence. That's what I enjoyed doing. I like shooting, blowing things up, spending my time in a fight house, MMA, jiu-jitsu, weightlifting, on the track. Like, that's where I enjoyed spending time. And that's also what my team asked of me. Like, that's what I brought to the team.
Yes.
So it was a win-win. Everybody wins. When you lose that, right, I had to shift my perspective. And really, I had to incorporate innovation and creativity. And to kind of hit that a little deeper, it's first getting over the realization that no matter how much time I spend in the weight room, I'm not going to be as physically dominant as I was with two legs. That's a tough pill to swallow when you base a lot of your identity on being this big, strong, fast, athletic dude. That was tough. I was able to get past it actually pretty quick with a lot of help, with help from a lot of friends and some real senior leaders that visited me in the hospital and kind of unintentionally planted some seeds that grew. Getting past that hurdle was tough. But once I did, I began looking at other areas in which I could increase my value to make up the gap that I was going to lose physically. Right. So I talked about creativity, innovation. How can I go about doing that? Right. So as a Green Beret, the sexy, cool guy stuff, the kicking indoors and shooting bad guys in the face, it's part of what we do, but that's actually a pretty small percentage of what makes us successful. There's a whole host of tasks and skills, kind of the softer side of soft, if you will, that really enables us to be successful, right? And these were things that I wanted nothing to do with, right? An understanding of intelligence, targeting, culture, foreign language, right? All this stuff that really requires just a lot of studying and reading, not in the weight room, not on the shooting range, which is where I really wanted to spend my time. So I began kind of dissecting what makes a really great, all-encompassing Green Beret. And I began kind of extrapolating all these different skills and started focusing on it. And I hated it, JT. It was brutal. I wanted nothing to do with it. It was boring and painful, but I was convinced that if I just stuck to it and I increased my stock within these other areas, if and when I got back as an operator, it would make up that difference. I'd raise that capital and make up that difference. And, if you fast forward from that point, about a year and a half, it actually proved to be true, which is pretty cool. When you're operating on blind faith, right, being, a belief in something for which no proof exists, which is really what I was operating on. And then it actually comes to fruition, kind of fast forward a little bit. I get back to Afghanistan as a one-legged guy, and I'm able to actually incorporate and employ some of these skills that I painfully struggled through. It was kind of come full circle. And hey, man, it actually did pay off. And I did raise that value. And I had that candid, no bullshit feedback from my teammates saying, hey, man, none of us can do this because we didn't spend the time in studying and doing that stuff. But you did. And you just employed it. And we're now, in a better place operationally because of that. So it was pretty cool, a painful, iterative journey, mostly through discomfort, fueled by discipline, with the hope and belief that it would pay off in the back end.
And the hope and belief that it pays off not for you, but it adds value to this thing that's bigger than you. That's like, we talk about Stoicism on here a lot, and this idea of it's not what happens to you, it's how you react to it, right? Like, you can sit around all day and go, hey, I'm a knuckle dragging, door kicking, gun shooting dude who just lost his leg. Now that's gone. Or you can say, hey, I'm going to accept what I'm capable of doing, and then expand on the things that maybe I just really wasn't into before. I've seen your TED Talk. I've watched you really give some motivational speeches. Did you ever see that aspect of it? Of hey, my role is going to shift. I'm going to be this silent professional that no one's going to know anything about. Wait a minute, this happens, this giant tragedy, and now people look to me to help motivate them in whatever way.
Yeah, I love that question, man. And you hit something I'm going to come back to in a second. You said sound professional. I want to just kind of keep that in people's minds for half a second. The short answer is no. Not in a million years. If you ask me this question, let's see, I lost my leg almost 9 years ago. 10 years ago, if you say, hey, man, one of these days you're going to be in front of the camera, you're going to be being interviewed, like, no, get out of here. I wanted nothing to do with that. It's not me. To this day, I really don't enjoy the sound of my voice. I really don't enjoy the spotlight. The quick story is after my 2015 deployment to Afghanistan, which was my first deployment as an amputee, I got back. We were very successful. There was a lot of visibility on me and my team, all the way up through the Beltway in Washington. We're checking in on the status of Nick and his team, which no SF team wants people paying attention that closely or really at all to what we're doing.
Sure.
So I give a ton of credit to my team leadership and teammates for enduring that extra bit of examination. We get back from the trip, no issues, successful. That was kind of when my introduction into the spotlight per se kind of began, because the Army and SF wanted to highlight, my accomplishment. Right? Like, wow, look, and a lot of that was based on our strength and conditioning program. And they played a huge role in my recovery. So one of the first kind of public-ish engagements was there were some members of Congress, budget committee, that were coming around, and they were looking at the strength and conditioning programs of the SF groups, because the SF groups were looking for more money to funnel into the program. So all these policymakers, decision makers come down from Washington. And the USASOC commander, General Cleveland, who was one of the guys that visited me at the hospital, one of the guys that planted one of those seeds I was telling you about, he emails, obviously, all the way through my chain of command, say, hey, can Nick come out and talk to these people about what this program has to offer? I think it'll be really impactful and really help us get kind of across the goal line of what we're trying to do. And I get this request, and I turned it down. I told my boss, I said, no, I want nothing to do with that. I got work to do. I got to plan our next training event. I got to plan our range next week. And that my response made it maybe one echelon up before it came back down. I said, hey, man, when a 3-star general asks you to do something, he's really not asking you shit.
Right.
So let me make this clear. You're going to be there, right place, right time, right uniform, and you're going to put on a good show. And I said, roger that.
Right.
So I show up. This is a couple of days later. And there's this whole entourage from Washington, and the general's there. And of course, he has an entire entourage. And, I kind of give him kind of the dog and pony show. I talk about the program, and I was honest. I mean, it was all real. Say, hey, these guys, this is what they did. This is what they do. Without them, I wouldn't be here today. And obviously caught a lot of attention. This, big one-legged guy who just got back from Afghanistan and is talking to these decision makers. And so I do the thing. At the end, General Cleveland would say, hey, man, it's good to see you. You look great. Last time I saw you, you were laid up in the hospital bed. I said, yes, sir. Thanks for coming to visit me, yada, yada, yada. And I said, hey, sir, to be honest with you, I turned down your request. And he laughs. He's like, yeah, I'm really not surprised to hear that. And I said, sir, I'll be honest with you. I really don't enjoy this stuff. He's like, Nick, listen, I know you don't enjoy this stuff. I know where your heart is. I know what you want to be doing. You want to be treated like any other team guy. You have a job to do that you love, and that's what you want to do. But you now have a responsibility and an obligation to pass on your lessons learned. And it's not for you. It's nothing to do with you. There's nothing to do with you craving the spotlight, craving attention, craving accolades. This is about your journey, what you've been through, what you've learned, helping the next guy or girl who's struggling with something similar that's trying to overcome some adversity. You owe it to them. And in that moment was like a light switch went off. It was from someone who I had a lot of respect for, someone in the community that kind of framed it that way for me. And it changed my perspective. And it was, it's still a struggle. It's still a transition into being more and more comfortable with putting myself out there. But what I have learned, to kind of come full circle here, is there is a difference between being a quiet professional and a silent professional, and kind of just recognizing that difference and being true to myself and knowing why I do what I do. And then the feedback that I've gotten since, some of it's pretty powerful, JT. I mean, it's tough to put a price tag on a spouse who emails me and says, hey, my husband was about to blow his head off and then he saw you, heard some of your stuff, and now he's doing great.
Jesus.
Like, how do you quantify that? How do you top that, man? So, long story short, it's not where I saw myself. And to be clear, my day job is still the priority. But the writing's on the wall, and I have kind of been fortunate to find my next purpose beyond service in uniform. It's still what I consider to be a service to the society in which I've pledged an oath to protect, just kind of through a different mechanism, man.
It 100% is. It's the oath is no different, right? I mean, literally, and you're not the first. I mean, I've had 2-star general on here who was dealing with mental illness, and when he was forced out of the military, he was the president of the National Defense University. Gets forced out, and went through hell, and has come back and got things under control. And now his mission is to serve the military members who might be, struggling one way or another. And I've heard you talk about, well, let me back up a little bit. The theme I get is, again, it's bigger than you. Motivating these people was not, you didn't ask for it, but it's become a responsibility because, you lived. A lot of people worked to help that happen, and the truth is, there's a lot of people out there struggling, and there is a lot of people that have lost their identity in one way or the other, especially within these military communities, and they need these messages. They need them, man, because there's not enough of them out there, and unfortunately, just the way that the slow gears of the government move sometimes, not everybody gets the help that they need. So if they hear a video on a YouTube video or something like that, again, that responsibility you must feel when you even receive a message like that. It's got to be like, holy shit, I didn't see that coming. This is
no, man, I didn't. Not 10 years ago, and not even a month ago. It's an honor and it's a privilege, and it's certainly impactful. To me, anyway, and I just think it's been part of. I really don't hone in on kind of redefining myself, right? I talked about innovation and creativity and kind of adding value in other areas. I'm still who I was. Right? I'm still the same person. I've adapted and I've modified, right? So you talk about having this identity and it being rooted in a struggle a lot of military law enforcement have when they transition out. It's a huge void that is almost impossible to completely replenish with one thing, because it's really tough to find that level of service and responsibility that you have when you do this kind of work day to day. And I think that people place a lot of pressure on themselves to kind of redefine who they are when that's really not necessary, right? You can take who you are and you can, add to it, you can reshape it, but you remain who you are to your core, and you take what you've learned through those experiences, that profession, that whatever, and you just reapply it in a new way. And in today's world, with how easy it is to connect to people and do all these different things virtually, remotely, right? Like the possibilities are endless to doing that. It's just, can you find a system, a process? Can you harness the tools and methodology that it takes to do that, and then to be fulfilled and happy, kind of along the way?
Yeah. Just like the fact that you couldn't do certain things, so you just added to it. It might have been uncomfortable, but there's an end point to that. There's light at the end of the tunnel, and then it's growth. I think this idea of friction, you need friction, because that's what gives you purpose, and there's growth from that. And it builds an inner feeling of self-pride that isn't dependent on just being this one thing. I don't know if that makes any sense at all. But
yeah.
I'm sure there's a way to look at even your example is you're a better, well-rounded Green Beret because you offer more things now. I don't know. I'm speculating, Nick. I have no idea. I could just be talking on my ass right now, but
What I do want to hit on, JT, quickly, because just the basis of kind of your message and theme and vision, and it's rooted in what we just talked about, right? Kind of adding to my resume, my repertoire, my value, right? Through these areas in which I wanted nothing to do with. The power in habits it's tough to quantify, right? But if you kind of just walk the dog, it's discipline equals habits equals consistency equals progress, right? Like those 4 steps I firmly believe in that. And habits is right there, step 2, right? So like, how do you create those habits? Is through discipline, right? And I don't want to take too much from Jocko, but he's got a phenomenal point. And that's really how my habits really began, right? It's through the discipline. It's through doing at least a little bit of research and learning into what it is we're trying to do, and then formulating even a loose plan of attack. I'm going to do these things, even though I don't necessarily like doing them, right? So the discipline to do the things that you believe will get you to that next objective, in that process creates the habit. Now, the first few times, it's brutal. Like, oh man, I hate this. I hate reading, or I hate doing my stretches, or whatever it is. But you stay disciplined. You keep doing it. You keep doing it. Now you dislike it a little less. Right? You may always dislike it, but you're starting to see the effects, and the habit is starting to kick in. It becomes routine. I just started doing it without thinking. Right? It's like waking up in the morning and taking a piss and want to brush my teeth. Like, I'm on autopilot. Like, I'm already doing it. By the time you realize I'm done, it's like, oh wow, like that just happened, right? Then lies the consistency, and then lies the progress, right? So that quick kind of journey is something that I kind of stumbled into, really. And looking at it backwards, it's like, man, this is how this happened, was by just forcing myself to do stuff that I didn't like, but eventually wanted to do anyway, right? I didn't like it, but I wanted to do it anyway because I needed the result.
Jacques says this idea that discipline equals freedom, and he's right. Like, it offers you the freedom to continue to be a Green Beret. It offers anyone who may be struggling with something the freedom to, if it's, for me, I drank too much, right? I stopped drinking. That offered me a level of freedom I never could have imagined. It's completely changed my life. And what it does for a person, again, it opens doors for him. When you make a good point of these little things, and you talk about logging and tracking, and I said it before we hit record, this idea that little hinges swing big doors. It may be slow, but over time, these little steps along the way, like, you didn't wake up yesterday as a Green Beret with one leg. Like, there was a lot of shit that went into that. And, right? So, and you know what? And when I talk to some people, and I've even said it, there's people like Jocko. I think the hard part for some people, and what they need to be reminded is, just like you, like Jocko didn't start waking up at 4:30 every day, doing kettlebells, 1,000 pull-ups, and all of this stuff. It takes time. And even though this may look like a mountain ahead of you that's not climbable, man, you got to take it this one step. And the idea of compound interest. You look back after a year or 2 years, it's amazing what we can achieve. But you got to start. And you got to wear those grooves in your brain that where it becomes autopilot. And that's it's the 4th today. So there's a lot of people on their New Year's resolution. I encourage everyone to check out James Clear's book, Atomic Habits. It's fantastic. Breaks the science down behind these things on ways to do this in our lives. It's great stuff, man. I think it's powerful. You could be a crack addict or the most successful person in the world. One thing we all have is habits. You dictate what the consequences are. Are they good? They bad? That part's up to you.
No. Yeah. Do you have the discipline to create them, right? And then continue to execute on them, i.e. consistency, right? And then do you have the determination to refine them, over time, to make them better, to make them more efficient, right? And that's something that was hammered into me through force, because you strap on a prosthetic leg and a clock starts to tick, right? It fits great first thing in the morning, but as I move around, I start to sweat, my leg starts to shrink, it becomes more and more uncomfortable, right? So just that in itself demanded me to be as efficient with my movements as possible, right? Economy of motion. So I began examining my daily habits to the micro degree, right? Like if I instead of reaching for the soap here, I reach this way and grab this thing instead. Like, I mean, crazy, right? I mean, borderline crazy, but I have this habit and it's working, but I want to make it better. I want to make it more efficient. And for me, again, that was forced through pain and discomfort. How can I maximize every single movement knowing I'm on this clock that's ticking, right? The challenge is for the person out there who doesn't necessarily have that same pain response that's used as a driving force. Can you still implement that same mindset and mentality, right? And the answer is yes. Obviously, you can. But will you? Will you take it to that next step? And I think that the formation of a habit is critical, and then the refinement of that is equally as critical. And it's kind of a never-ending process, man. It's never going to be perfect, but we strive for that.
Yeah, I think one of the problems is it's the way things are looked at. If you flip the script on that and say, hey, it's the kindest thing you can do for yourself. You're not keeping stuff from you. You're adding value to yourself. I think that, I've seen it in the world of recovery where someone says like, man, I can't go without it. I'm like, well, if you are going without it, you don't understand what you're doing is the best thing you could do for yourself. Like, that's self-love, giving in and going, doing this thing that is destructive. Well, you know what the outcome is, and it's not good for you. So, yeah. All right, brother. Listen, where can people find you? Where can they get more information on you, Nick?
Easiest place is probably my website. It's machinenick.com. It's got links to all my socials. It's got contact me page if you want to just hit me up and ask a question or just kind of talk weird. I make it a point to get to all of them. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, but the website's got all the links to all that stuff.
And you got a book coming out here too, man. Can you Objective Secure? Can you break that down for us? Yeah,
I do, man. I think the release will be probably the next couple of weeks, which is cool. It's exciting. It's scary. Again, I talked about kind of putting myself out there, so I'm doing that in kind of a very real way. But it's a lot of what we've been talking about here, JT. It began out. The genesis of it was efficiency. Right? I began to get a lot of emails and messages, and the questions were really the same. How did you do what you did? Because this is what I'm struggling with. So I just decided to kind of jot down the process and kind of create a very short, to the point, concise guide, if you will. Right? A lot of retrospective analysis, look at my log, look at my journal, say, hey man, how did I do this? Really just so I can speed up the response time, right? Because I'm getting hundreds and thousands of the same type of, boom, quick, copy, paste, send, here you go, brother. Yeah. Enjoy, hope it helps. That's really where it began. And then COVID hits early last year. I just kind of keep writing, and I find myself enjoy writing, which I never thought would happen. And, fast forward and 70,000 words later, I have a book. So it's not an autobiography by any means. It's not my memoirs. It's not a bunch of cool guy stories of combat in Afghanistan. It's a guide. It's a guide. It's designed to assist someone who's struggling to overcome adversity, struggling to identify a goal and reach that goal, broken down between the mindset that I use and I focused on and still do to this day, and then the strategy that I employed and the tools that I use. So I'm excited to get it out there, man. And And again, just kind of cast a wider net on those that I may be able to assist.
Dude, listen, and this isn't a takeaway from some amazing books out there, but we don't need any more books we need more books like what you're writing. We need, because there's adversity everywhere across the board. And one of the things I loved what you did, even when you're talking about ethos, is, you looked at the military side, this mission first, never accept defeat and never quit. And then you flipped it and you said, all right, well, everyone has a mission, right? Everyone, no matter whether you're in the military or not. And I think these messages translate, and there's an audience for them. And there's not enough people who have bridged that gap over to the civilian side, man. Jocko's got a huge following. Those people are always going to be there, but man, your story's too powerful. It needs to be, there needs to be more people hearing it. So
I appreciate it, bro.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, Nick, I'm honored to have you on here, man. I hope we keep in touch. I really enjoy this conversation, man. And let's talk again soon.
Absolutely, bro. Thanks for having me, JT. I appreciate it.
All right, man. All right, that's it for me. Thank you guys for checking this out. If you want to hear more, see more, learn more about what we're doing, please check out consequenceofhabit.org. If you guys want to see this in, you can go on to YouTube and watch the video of this, but it's not impressive. We've got some video stuff coming very soon where these things are all going to be videotaped, so you can actually see these things. Wow, you can see our faces while this conversation is going on, but please check out our YouTube video. Subscribe. If you have not done so already, please subscribe on Apple or wherever you get your podcasts. Oh, and if you want to hear more about Nick's story from him, please check out his book, Objective Secure. You can pre-order that on Amazon or from his website. All right. I'll catch you guys next week.